We were the lucky country. We went camping on weekends. We played cricket in the park with the family. We spent time making memories that would last forever. Now we have lost our jobs, our homes, our businesses, and our lives. Our state and federal governments have taken our rights away, destroyed our freedoms, and have been ruling by decree in the name of safety. This is not the new normal. We will not watch our country be run by bureaucrats. We will stand up and we will fight back. It is time to mark the day that matters to every single Australian. That day is Freedom Day. On the 4th of December, we will rise for freedom over fear. We will demand an end to the lockdowns, an end to the state of emergency, and we will demand real leadership. The Liberal Democrats will rise for our day of freedom. We will rise to end the state of emergency. We will rise and take our country back. Will you rise with us on Freedom Day? Freedom Day, December 4, 2021. Join the fight for freedom. Join the Liberal Democrats.
Authorised J. Humphreys, Mount Weatherly, Victoria.
Welcome to this week's episode of Liberty Chat, where we bring you our weekly podcast talking all things liberty or lack thereof it from around the country and beyond. Now, this is our live stream event for registered members of the Liberal Democrats. So hopefully you're a member or you're sort of spreading the word, but if you're not a member and watching this later, obviously get to our website, ldp.org.au. Join, donate, volunteer. My name's Kirsty O'Sullivan, and we're bringing you our regular panelist of Mr. David Limbrick in Melbourne.
Hi, everyone.
We have Mr. John Ruddick in Sydney.
Good evening, good evening.
And Mr. Campbell Newman in beautiful Brisbane town. I didn't really hear you then, Cam. I hope your mic's working properly.
It's working. It's okay.
That's much better. That's much better. Now, tonight we've got another great episode, but there's been so much going on all around the place. David, you have been very busy the last few days, as usual, in Melbourne. What's been going on in your world?
Well, where to start? Yeah, it's been crazy. So I'm back at Parliament, in case you didn't notice. See, I'm back in my office, so I handed in my papers. I'm not in a nightclub anymore, and I'm not doing this from my front bedroom either. So I'm actually wearing a jacket and stuff. But well, I was wearing a jacket last time, I think, but I probably wasn't wearing pants or something. But now I'm wearing pants today, I assure you.
Yes, we did get a few comments about your lack of pants last time.
Well, then no one saw it. But anyway, yeah, so this week we've been doing, so I'm on the Parliamentary Accounts and Estimates Committee, and we've been doing a financial performance outcomes hearings. And that sounds really, really boring. And for a lot of it, it is, I suppose. But you're allowed to ask questions about things that happened in the last financial year. And I asked about something that was very interesting and made the news this morning, and not a lot of people have picked up on it. So Victoria, earlier in the year, I think it was back in May, made this big announcement that they're going to send 1,000 ventilators and other equipment to India. Because India was having trouble with COVID and all this sort of thing. And we actually thought, okay, well, that sounds like a sensible thing to do, because we bought 4,000 of these things and wasn't looking like we're going to actually use them. So might as well give them to someone who does need them, I suppose, rather than sitting in a warehouse gathering dust. Anyway, I was asking about ventilators, and I said, well, how many of these ventilators that we used have we actually got, and how many have we used and stuff? And they said, well, we've deployed about 1,000 and we've got about 3,000 sitting in the warehouse. And I said, didn't we give 1,000 of those to India though? And they were like, yeah, about that. Yeah, so it looks like they never actually sent them.
Wow.
And we heard, so I wasn't sure, like I thought, well, maybe the government had other ventilators that weren't in the stockpile or something. And the media went back and checked with the government, and apparently some anonymous person said, oh yeah, India didn't want them anymore. So yeah, so apparently that didn't happen.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, so that was pretty weird. But yeah, other things that have been happening. There's been basically protests every single day at Parliament. People have been sitting out the front and stuff, and you know, it's usually a few dozen people. Last week I was going out and saying g'day to them, and you know, just hanging out and saying hello, and they were asking me questions. Did an impromptu live stream. Like I just walk out there and they turn on the camera and start asking me questions, and they said, some people were commenting on social media saying, oh, you look a bit nervous. And I was like, well, I wasn't really planning on a live stream, but you know, I'll give it a go. And I was answering their questions. I think I did my best.
Yeah, no, you did very well.
But then last night, Voice for Victoria organised an event. So that's Emily from Voice for Victoria. And it was like a rally on the steps of Parliament. And it was really well organised. She did a wonderful job. With a bunch of different speakers, but for the first time, there was Liberal Party MPs there speaking, two, David Davis and Ryan Smith from the Liberal Party, and there was me, there was another independent MP, there was Crystal Mitchell, and a couple of other people as well.
The small business, the small business group, yeah.
So there was a bunch of different people, and yeah, it was pretty good. So, you know, there was probably, I don't know, it ended up probably being around 1,000 people showed up total. Like, you know, it sort of started off like a few hundred and then got bigger and bigger. But it was streamed on social media. The media coverage was okay. It was interesting because we did it in the evening, which is very unusual for a protest. And it sort of had a positive in that it didn't get mainstream media, which is sort of a good thing, because the mainstream media twists everything, but it got massive reach on social media. So Real Ruction's feed, last time I checked, it was close to 300,000 views just on my social media. Like if I just check it now, what are we talking about? Yeah,
it was really great. Yeah,
10,000. So yeah, and I did sort of a bit of a quirky speech. It was based on a video that I saw and sort of inspired me by some random person on the internet. I don't know who made it. So if the person who made it is out there, then good, you did a good job.
It was great. And if we go into how it ended, it's not just.
Yeah, it's not just. So
yeah,
I got a chant going, and yeah, people like that. And I kept it really short and sweet. But yeah, the Liberal Party MPs did a pretty good job. I hadn't seen them in person, rabble rouse before, but they were better than I expected.
I think it's the first time both of those Liberal Party MPs had so many claps and cheers ever. Probably.
I don't know. Like they've done their bit of rabble rousing before. I've spoken to them about it. You know, like they've done like I don't know. There was a toxic soil rally things that they had out west and a bunch of other things that they've done, but I've never seen them in action, and they did all right. Like, you know, fair, you know, credit where it's due.
Yeah.
But so that's been a big thing. And today I did something weird. I did an interview with German television, and it's going to be broadcast in a fortnight apparently. And that's sort of like Germany's version of Foreign Correspondent. And they're doing a story on the COVID response all around the world. And they're very, very particular about their footage. And they went to a lot of effort to get good footage around Parliament and stuff. So I did an interview with them, and they were interested in, you know, what we'd had to say and what's going on in Victoria. So that was really cool.
Yeah.
I've also done a couple of other interviews recently as well on Topher's documentary. So that will be being published before Christmas, he said.
21st of December, I think, or 20th or 21st of December.
Yeah, he said he was aiming for just before Christmas. So that's going to be good.
Yes.
And another documentary on a different topic, but that will be published in March. And that's about the Frankston murders and stuff.
Yes.
Totally different topic, but that's going to be on Stan, and I think it's going to be syndicated internationally. So
wow.
Yeah. So that's going to be interesting as well. Not the nicest topic, but no. But yeah. So, but you know, the big thing is this pandemic legislation that's coming up next week in Parliament. it's going to be a huge fight.
Yes.
You know, we think the government's probably going to pass it, but yeah, they're really ramping up the demonisation. So, you know, there was some people that did some nasty things to some of the crossbenchers. They sent them some nasty letters and things like this. And I would urge everyone who's watching this to remember that when you engage with people on issues, to do it politely and rationally and in the most civil way possible. Because if you don't do that, you're actually harming the cause that you're trying to promote. You're actually harming it. And I don't know whoever sent these horrible letters to these people, but they're actively undermining opposition to the government. So they might as well just join the Labor Party. You know, like they're really counterproductive people who do this. I really hope that they had nothing to do with us and all that sort of thing. But as I always say, whenever you engage with people, do it in the most civil way that you can possible. Some people were heckling the Premier today as well, and the government made a big deal about it. And basically what they're trying to do is smear any sort of opposition to what the government's doing as, you know, unhinged, not founded in reason, violent, extremist, all this sort of stuff. And anyone that does this sort of stuff is just playing straight into the government's hands. And I would urge people to be calm and civil and do whatever they can to get their idea across in the most peaceful way possible.
Exactly. And speaking of extremists, some crazy things have been announced in Queensland today that's made me very angry as a Queenslander, Campbell. What on earth is Anastasia doing and Queensland Health doing up there now?
Well, I think the most pertinent issues to talk about is the requirement to be vaccinated to be able to attend any sort of restaurant, coffee shop, bar, etc. That's really the nub of it. I mean, there's other stuff in there as well, but that comes in after the 17th of November, and I think it's getting a fair bit of attention. There's a very prominent businessman by the name of Phil DeBella, who in the past has been a very big supporter of mine. Those of you who are familiar with the DeBella coffee brand,
yes,
he was the guy who founded that about 20 years ago and sold out some years ago and made a fair bit of money, but he's still involved in coffee and support for small business and the like. And he's got quite a platform, and he on social media himself, and he's had a really good go at the government. And that was I think he was on Sunrise this morning. And he's just saying, you know, the stuff that we would say, that it's, you know, it's a form of apartheid. It's just un-Australian. It's just got to be opposed. And it's great that he's doing that. So I did a tweet yesterday about the same sort of stuff against the government that got a lot of attention. Thank you to those of you in this podcast who retweeted that. And it was basically really hooking into the Premier on that. So that got a lot of attention. Interestingly, even one of the guys on ABC Radio, on 612 ABC here in Brisbane, Steve Austin, put out a tweet pointing out quite pointedly that, well, hang on, today in Brisbane, you can go to lunch in a restaurant and no one cares if you're vaccinated or unvaccinated. You're meant to wear a mask on the way in, but as soon as you sit down, you're just all having a normal lunch. But from the 17th onwards, the unvaccinated people can't come in. So, you know, really, it's quite ridiculous. And there are all sorts of other weird, things that are coming out of this. I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on the Premier on this one. So look, that's just the main issue up here over this last couple of days. I should just say as well, I mean, media-wise, I've continued to do a fair bit of Sky. I was there on Sunday night. I was on Peter Credlin last night. Probably will be on Paul Murray tomorrow night. The other thing is we had a small protest on Sunday, which was good to actually get out there with the people in the party and actually give. I suppose it's the first thing that we've done together since I've become a candidate. So it was good to do that, and we live stream that, and we'll do more of that as required.
Yes,
Campbell,
no, it's good.
Is there a sunset date for this locking out the unvaxxed in Queensland, or it's open-ended at this stage?
Oh, look, I'm not sure, mate. It sounds.
I think it's open-ended.
It's
Unlike New South Wales, it's open-ended.
It's sort of, and like I don't mean to be flippant or sound like I'm not interested, but yeah, I don't know about you guys and those watching tonight, but like I just can't keep track of it all. Like, if the moon's, sort of in the third quarter and the wind is from the southwest and there's a high tide on the Bayside in Brisbane and you've been vaccinated before the 4th of the month, then it's okay, but otherwise it's not. I mean, who makes this crap up? I did a podcast this afternoon which was live streamed with a chap by the name of David Pello. It's a website called Good Source, which will be posted as well. And just we were really getting into the detail of this stuff, and and the inconsistencies and the nonsense. I suppose just a couple other points which I probably haven't made in the past couple of weeks. We've now got a Queensland campaign office that's been set up. So for people who want to volunteer, the point of contact is Mark Ruddick, but you can go through people like Lloyd Russell or Richard and Anthony, our president up here.
Or you can just email, or you can go straight to the website and volunteer, or you just email contact@ldp.org.au and it'll get passed to the right people. And
it's taken a while to get organised and be able to productively, sort of deploy volunteers, but we're into that space now. And the final thing is fundraising, doing a lot of work on that, and it's terrific, the support we're getting from people in business, and particularly it's great when you see people who until the last year or two were dyed in the wool, coalition supporters, big donors who are now going, well, what can we do for you? So that's very encouraging.
Yes. There's quite a lot of comments in there as well. And Joshua's saying these premiers are so drunk on power. They don't want things to return to normal, to relinquish their power, and that's for sure. People may notice I'm wearing my Trust the Science shirt today in solidarity with a wonderful doctor down here in Melbourne who has had his clinic raided by the government today and APRA involved. 7 officers turned up at his clinic today and took his patient files and also his appointment book. He's been a GP for more than 30 years. He's a wonderful man, Dr. Mark Hobart, and I have seen him as a patient. So now they have my files, and I know many people in Melbourne who have also seen him. And I'm really quite disgusted with what's going on, and of course everything that goes on from.
Can I just make one point about this too? When we're talking about the coalition and the PM, we must say this continuously. This coward of a prime minister, this softie, never. I'll qualify that. He did it with WA in the last 3 days, but he never calls these things out. When the police fire baton rounds in Victoria against Australians, he's silent. And I've also watched some pathetic sort of podcast videos and sort of posts from Frydenberg. And I just say to people this evening, direct your anger to them as well, because they allow this stuff to go on. It's not on. He has, the office of Prime Minister. He can speak with authority, or should be speaking with authority. He should be calling out Palaszczuk. He should be assisting in the mounting of legal challenges now about border closures. He should be calling out this stuff, and so should all his MPs and senators who are silent. So they are complicit. They're just as much.
We agree.
We shouldn't direct our eye just at the state governments.
Correct. And there's the Liberal Party federally, their social media today was a quote from Scott Morrison saying that people don't want the government to tell them what to do. The most tone deaf thing I've ever seen. Now we better change the subject. Better bring in our first guest. We have the wonderful Professor Ian Plimer. Ian can come into the room now. Ian's probably, I would say he's Australia's best known geologist, a bit of a rabble-rouser, which I quite like. Ian is going to talk to us a little bit about what's been going on in Glasgow, and he's also got a new book that we obviously are very keen to speak as well. Welcome, Professor Plimer.
Thank you.
I mean, rabble rouser. I'm offended, and I want to know who to sue. I'm going to start with something absolutely, totally non-controversial.
Isn't truth a defence?
Pete with the Greens. I've had a gutful of the Greens.
That's right.
And I've had a gutful of the way the Greens and various climate industrial complexes are destroying the economy. They have totally destroyed the education of our young children. The end result of this is a salami approach, where everyone has a little bit of a slice taken off on their electricity bill, on their gas bill, on their fuel. And this is not good for anyone. And fairly recently, I finished a book called Green Murder.
Yes.
Totally non-controversial, of course. And that's
no, with a title like that, that's not controversial at all.
Controversial at all.
Now, we do also have a little glimpse of...
Or go to Connor Court Publishing in Brisbane. And in this book, I go right into the background. There's
the picture there of Green Murder, and obviously we are big fans of Anthony Capello up there in Brisbane with Connor Court. He puts out a lot of excellent books around the countryside, so definitely get to Connor Court's website and say hi from all of us.
It starts with a proposition. No one has ever shown that human emissions of carbon dioxide drive global warming. It's never been shown scientifically. And I have asked and asked and asked for this information. I've been searching the literature. I cannot find it. So the whole fundamentals are wrong. And if we look back in time, and as someone who does deal with history and archaeology and geology, we've never had a correlation between temperature and carbon dioxide. There's never been climate change driven by carbon dioxide. All we see is the exact opposite. And the opposite is we've had 6 great ice ages, each of which kicked off when we had more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere than now. So it's obvious carbon dioxide does not and cannot drive global warming. And so the past tells us what's happening in the present and what will happen in the future. And then I look at models. I mean, as soon as I hear the word model, be it on COVID, be it on economics, be it on climate, I just flick channels, or I want to go outside and vomit. Models are an interesting attempt to try to understand nature. But we know so little about how the planet works that that's all they are. We cannot predict the future from the models. And I go into, in this book, I have a chapter on predicting the future and how over the last 2,000 years, we've had thousands of people predicting the end of the world. And these predicting frying and dying, or freezing, or dying in an environmental toxic soup. Now, if just one of these people was correct, then we wouldn't be here. So
when I was a kid, it was all the hang on, what's going on here? When I was a kid, it was all the hole in the ozone layer, and we were getting terrified of hairspray, and I used to be very scared of my nana using her hairspray, thinking that we're all going to die because the hole in the ozone layer was going to get so big and fry us. That didn't happen.
And what we didn't hear was that a lot of the ozone derived from chemical reactions between sunlight and salt on ice. So there was a lot we didn't hear about that, and the same with climate. We don't hear anything about the past. There's no recognition that history has something to say, or geology has something to say. So the predictions are laughable, and a lot of these predictions get attention by predicting catastrophes like sea level rises or massive hurricanes. Now, Australia's got some really good examples of sea level rise. If we go around the east coast of Australia, we see a nick just under the base of cliffs, and that's where sea level was about 2 meters higher only 4,000 years ago.
Yes.
What's happened is that sea level has dropped since a global warm period about 4,000 to 6,000 years ago. We see it all the way around Australia. We've got jetties that have been there for a long while. I think Busselton in Western Australia has been there for 157 years. We've got Fort Denison in Sydney Harbour, which was built to stop a Russian naval invasion during the Crimean War. Well, it was finished after the Crimean War, but it did a good job. The Russian navies never invaded us. But the tidal measuring station there shows that there is a very, very, very slight sea level rise, but it could be due to something else. It could be due to Fort Denison sinking. And we see that at the Port Adelaide sea level measuring station.
Yes.
Where at Port Adelaide, we've got a pier where we've had sea level measuring and the pier's been sinking. So obviously sea level's been going up. So when we measure sea level as a catastrophe, when we're all going to drown, we have to remember measuring stations move, land goes up and down, and sea level goes up and down. Now, a great example of that are the old beaches that are mined in New South Wales at Pooncarie, which is only 500 kilometres inland from where the beaches retreated to, and that was in Victoria. And we've got about 200 beaches all the way up to the Murray-Darling Basin. So that is due to either a sea level fall or a land level rise, and probably in the Murray-Darling Basin, probably both.
Yes.
So I look at these and then I start to look at the implications of it. Okay, we're all going to die. We've got to stop emitting this food of life, which makes plants grow and makes crops grow, and we can feed more people. And I look at renewables, these wonderful bird and bat chomping machines that at the end of their life, which is really short, we don't know what to do with the waste. And so we just dump it. And this waste is dumped. There are highly toxic compounds in turbine blades, the same in solar panels. These are leaching into the water table. Now, if you were a factory or an agricultural enterprise or a mine and dump toxins like that, you will be strung up, but not so for our wonderful renewable industry who apparently hold the high moral ground. And we've had this grand betrayal that renewables were going to lower our electricity costs. They haven't. And just look at the way Germany or the UK or Texas or California have almost gone into complete blackout mode for long periods of time because the renewables didn't work. Now, it's funny that, you know, I can see the sun starting to set here in Adelaide, and it seems to happen every day. So that means you only get about 8 hours of solar power. Clearly, you had backup. And we do have the backup, but it's never acknowledged.
Yes.
So I look at this grand betrayal of the renewables, and then I start to look at what we do with renewables, which are meant to give us excess energy. And this is meant to go into electric cars, and we store the extra renewable energy in batteries. Now, these electric cars are fabulous. We've first had a hydrogen oxygen car in 1807. People first tried electric cars in 1839. We don't have them because they're too expensive. And
Scott Morrison is really pushing them today. Like, that's his thing today. He's pushing the electric vehicles.
Well, I spend a lot of my time in Broken Hill. I'd like to see Scott Morrison come up and visit from his electorate. I can drive from Sydney to Broken Hill. It's only 1,300 kilometres. I can do it in a day. He would take 2 weeks and he would have no charging stations on the way. Plus, he'd have a really good chance of the electric car catching a light.
Yes.
And if it did catch a light, then these fires you can't put out. And these fires produce hydrofluoric acid. Now, hydrofluoric acid is so potent, it will dissolve rocks, it will dissolve glass, it will dissolve bricks. Electric vehicles are fabulous if they're subsidised. So now we have subsidised renewables, and they're supporting subsidised cars. And the next big con coming along is subsidised mega batteries, and we've already seen that big fire at Geelong.
Yes.
And the next big con coming along, just to take another slice of salami out of your pocket, is the massive push towards hydrogen. Now, to make hydrogen, you need to put more energy in than you get out, than the hydrogen can produce. This is the second law of thermodynamics. Kids should know this from school. So we're using subsidised renewables to make an energy deficient process to give us hydrogen. That's not the worry. I mean, this is just a massive waste of taxpayers' money and the public pay for it. But the real problem with hydrogen is it's dangerous. Look at the Challenger explosion of January 1986.
I remember it very well.
And hydrogen is one of the most explosive substances around. And this is why I got interested in chemistry as a kid. We made hydrogen. We made these hydrogen balloons and blew them up. And you can take out windows, you know, from 20 metres away very easily with one of these things.
Yes.
Now, if we're going to pipe hydrogen or have hydrogen cars, or hydrogen-bearing vehicles such as trucks carrying it from one place to the other. God help us, because if there was an explosion, it is bigger than any petrochemical explosion, but it's also a wonderful opportunity for terrorists. A truck full of chlorine is great. A truck full of ammonium nitrate is great. A truck full of aviation fuel is great. But if you've got a truck full of hydrogen, you can take out half a city with this. It is incredibly explosive, and it leaks through solid metal. And as it leaks through solid metal, it weakens it, and that metal can shear and break very easily. So I then asked the final question, well, what in the hell happened? We once had cheap, reliable electricity. That came from coal, it came from gas, and some from hydro. We've never shown that human emissions of carbon dioxide drive global warming, but because we've dumbed down our education system over 40 years, we are now able to pull off the biggest scientific con that there ever has been in the history of the planet. And coupled onto that, we've now got the biggest financial con that we've ever had in the history of the planet. So my advice to any viewers is glue up your wallet, hang on to your money, because they're after you. They're coming for you in your electricity bill, in your gas bill. You will have a fuel levy, you will have a levy on your rates. Hang on to everything, because this is the greatest transfer of money from the middle and lower classes to the elites. And it will end up in going the opposite direction to what coal did. Coal gave us a middle class. We are going to lose a middle class because of this. And it's out of our hands. And Glasgow was a talk fest.
Correct. Well, even the amount of
stealing your money.
That's right. The amount of private jets and cars, like even the president of the USA had 50-something cars in his entourage. Everyone was flying in on private jets. I lost count of how many private jets all flew in for those people in Glasgow to preach to us regular plebs about what we should be doing with having one car and a light on in our lounge room. It was really quite appalling. And Prince Charles, our royal family, getting involved as well. They're supposed to be apolitical. And then, of course, we had a screeching from Greta as well. I'm sure you watched the whole Glasgow thing with a lot of fixed interest, Ian.
Of course I did. I had nothing else to do with my time.
There was a lot of amazing dancing and poetry. And
that's going to change the climate.
Yes.
Poetry, it's scientifically proven that poetry stops global warming.
Yes. Lots of light shows and music and stuff like that. I'm sure they all felt very good about themselves for attending.
Well, they do, but they're hypocrites and they're totally ignorant. And you can ask them one simple scientific question. You say, well, you're telling me about carbon pollution. I mean, really, we're talking about carbon dioxide. Oh, yes. Well, just to make sure we're talking about the same thing, what is the molecular weight of carbon dioxide? And they give you a blank look. And you know that you are not dealing with anything to do with what's written on your T-shirt. It's got nothing to do with...
That's right. Yes.
Politics. It's a method of skinning you alive. And all the people that we know well are in there to make money, and it's going to impoverish us. God help the next generation who do not have the education and the critical and the analytical skills and will not have the money to fight it.
Correct.
And we need a massive force to counteract the Greens, and this is where the Lib Dems come in.
Yes.
We don't have any other party taking the Greens on front on. And the purpose of this book was to do what Conservatives don't do, and that is get into the gutter and have a fight, which I want to do. And all I want to do is to end up covered in blood, but face up. That's all.
Professor Plimer, there's some lovely comments here. I'm just going to read out a couple. Well, Russell does say, I agree entirely with Ian Plimer's argument and I've already ordered 3 books. So that is great. Benjamin says, Professor Plimer is a bloody legend. I've been following, dare I say, hero worshipping Professor Plimer since he was debunking Bible myths. Here we go. One from Sasho saying ScoMo is trying to chase the vote of people who will never vote for him at the expense of those who would support him. And that is certainly true. Ben also says, if I buy the hard copy, can I get it signed? Please, 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 please.
Well,
Ben, we will organise that. We will organise that.
One thing about the copies. Now, the publisher made a mistake with the price. So everyone that orders now and can get their order done in the next fortnight, every one of those will be signed by me. I'll go to Brisbane and sit down. There's about 3 days of signing. And if you want it inscribed to someone, I will inscribe it. But the price will go up because he made a mistake. And quite often when I've had at book signings, a lady will bounce up to me and ask for something interesting to be written there. So I'll write, Dear Mary, thank you for that wonderful weekend in Paris, and sign it and then close it.
See, this is why I described you as a rabble rouser, Ian. You are. Fraser.
The lady would go out and open it and either screech with laughter or come back and say, well, what happens if my husband sees this? I said, well, buy another one.
I love that. Fraser says, thanks for all you do, Ian. Love hearing your wisdom. David says, before the ozone layer, it was nuclear weapons, which turned out to be the greatest makers of peace ever. Roger says, false predictions on climate change are documented in extinction.org. There's a lot of comments here. Natalie says, I used to love watching Captain Planet. I remember that one as well. Daniel says, if the sea level rises by 1 centimetre per year, I'm confident in my ability to outrun it. Ben says, I'll worry about sea levels rising when Obama and the other climate change hucksters sell their waterfront properties. And that is very true.
Exactly right.
Very, very true. I think we all kind of know. I mean, I'm from a coastal area in Queensland myself, and I know even the salt pans that are probably 3 kilometres in from the water, you dig around in there, you find shells all over the place. Liz says...
Well, just adding to that, if you look at Hobart Airport, Adelaide Airport, Sydney Airport and Brisbane Airport, they are all built on shallow marine mud, which were underwater 6,000 years ago. That's why the land is flat, and that's why we put an airport there.
Yes.
And the airports in Eastern Australia, we can include Townsville and Cairns in that also. The airports in Eastern Australia are showing us that sea level is 2 metres higher.
That's exactly right. Well, I can't even read all of the wonderful comments we have about you here, Ian. As I said, if you wanted to get into the chat box there yourself, but thank you very, very, very much for joining us tonight, Ian. Wonderful to meet you. Thank you. So we're going to bring in John and Campbell and David again, but John is going to give us this week's version of Blistery History. And I hear it is a tribute to Calvin Coolidge. What have we got, John?
Well, firstly, can I say, Kirsty, just how magnificent Professor Plimer is. I'm going to be buying his book finished.
Yes, Connor Court. Go to Connor Court's website and support Anthony and Julie Capello up there in Brisbane. They do some wonderful work.
Great people and always great books. And look,
yes.
And can I throw in one thing too, which I might have should have mentioned at the beginning as well about this stuff. But there's an essential poll came out in the last 24 hours. Morrison's approval rating is down. Why is it down? Because it's tanked in Queensland in only 2 or 3 weeks. And it's this issue. This issue. So thanks, Ian.
Yes. And we will plug in the link to the book in the chat box there. Les is asking for that. Rob will put that in for you. Take it away, John.
Okay. Well, look, there have been 3 great libertarian presidents of the United States. 2 of them are very famous, Thomas Jefferson and Ronald Reagan. Now, the greatest libertarian is Calvin Coolidge, and he is sadly forgotten to history. So I wanted to sort of try and resurrect, particularly for Australians, what we know about Calvin Coolidge. Now, here's the background. Karl Marx dies in 1883. The History Channel ranks him the 8th most influential person of the last 1,000 years. But when he died in London, only 12 people turned up to his funeral. He was not well known when he died, but obviously he had powerful ideas. Bad ideas, but powerful ideas. Now, Marx thought that the communist revolution would occur in Germany, Britain, or the United States, because he thought it would only happen in an industrialized country. Karl Marx completely ignored Russia. And there were very, very hardcore communists in America. And there was one guy kept running for president in one election, I think just in 1912, he got about 6% of the vote, which is not bad for somebody that wants to say they want to have a hardcore, turn over the whole of society revolution. Now, after World War I, well, in 1917, we have the communist revolution in Russia, and that inspired the communists in a big way all around the world, including in Australia. We had a young guy called John Curtin, who was a hardcore Marxist at the time. He loved the Bolsheviks. He used to give speeches in Melbourne about how we need to be just like Lenin. People have forgotten that, but that's in the history books about John Curtin. But in America, they had this attempted communist uprising in 1919. It was called the First Red Scare. They let off about 50 bombs, and they had massive strikes, and they were all walking around saying, "We want to be like Lenin in Russia." Now, and it culminated in September 1920. They let off a bomb in Wall Street, the heart of the financial world, of course, and they killed about 32 people. There it is, thank you. And that was a big deal. Now, it's not 9/11, okay, but I mean, 36 people being killed out of the blue in Wall Street really rocked America. Now, what that did was, America was in a depression at this time. It's called the Forgotten Depression, because everyone talks about the depression of the 1930s, which we will get to. But there was about 2 years after World War I, there was this period called the Forgotten Depression. It was very serious. And now what happened after, in the middle of that Forgotten Depression and that bombing in Wall Street and this attempted communist uprising, the American people in the 1920 election voted for Warren Harding, the Republican, to be president. And it was the biggest victory in American history. Not according to the Electoral College, but according to raw votes. He got 61% of the vote. The Democrat got 34% of the vote. That's more than Ronald Reagan. That's more than Richard Nixon, more than Lyndon Johnson. Now, so then what happens is, here he is. So Warren Harding becomes the president, and his vice president was somebody called Calvin Coolidge, who had been the governor of Massachusetts and who was not famous, except that as the governor of Massachusetts, he had really cracked down very hard on this attempted communist, like really violent strikes, and it was Marxist. Now, so Calvin Coolidge is the vice president and Warren Harding is the president, with this massive majority and massive majorities in the House and the Senate. So it was a very powerful government. And what did they do in the middle of a depression? They massively cut spending, and they massively cut taxes, and they massively cut regulation on business. And often when you bring in these types of reforms, like when Reagan and Thatcher first come to power, the medicine tastes bad at first, and actually the economy got a little bit bad for about a year. But then the big boom started, the roaring 1920s. And then Warren Harding tragically died of a heart attack about 2 years into his presidency. So Calvin Coolidge becomes the president. Now, he was known as, there he is, he was known as Silent Cow, because he had no charisma, but he was the one that really hardcore believed in libertarian economics. And at his inauguration speech, I'll just read you out some of his lines. He says, "I want the people of America to be able to work less for the government and more for themselves. I want them to have rewards for their own industry. This is the chief meaning of freedom." He said, "The business of America is business." Now, then what happened was America, Coolidge brought in much bigger tax cuts than Harding, cut regulation and cut spending in a big way. And America absolutely boomed. In our modern world today, so many of the appliances that we take for granted, like cars, refrigerators, the radio industry started, America absolutely boomed, and those blessings went all around the whole world. We all benefit from what happened in the 1920s, in the roaring 20s in America. It was because of Calvin Coolidge. Now, things went so well in America that in 1924, when Calvin Coolidge was going for re-election, and you know how hotly contested American presidential elections are, Calvin Coolidge said, "I'm not going to campaign. I'm going to sit on my porch, and I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to give speeches. I'm not going to write letters to the opinion pieces. I'm not going to do anything, because I think I've done a great job." Now, maybe you agree. He said to the people, I said, "Maybe you agree with me. Maybe you don't. I'll just sit back." And he won. It was called the Porchlight Campaign, and he won massively. It'll be like the Liberal Democrats in 10 years' time. After we've been in government for 3 years, we'll say, we don't have to even campaign to get re-elected. Everything is so fantastic. We're not going to spend 1 cent on it.
This is a campaign I'd like to see.
Yes.
I'd like to be involved in.
Well, let's do it, Campbell.
Is it a margaritas sort of on the porch?
Oh, absolutely. We'll just take it very easy. We'll even switch off our phones for 3 months. We'll say, "Did we?"
There was that ABC series Rake, where he ended up winning a spot in the Senate by campaigning on nothing, and his whole imagery was he had like tape across his mouth, campaign of nothing, and he won a spot because people were like, "Great, politicians who say nothing, brilliant."
So Coolidge, things just kept getting better and better in his second term. Okay, now then, when he, and then he was known as Silent Cow. Okay, he was very sort of no ego. He had a lot of similarities with Reagan, but the differences were obviously Reagan had the Hollywood charm, the good looks and everything else, but Reagan did not have the congressional majorities. He had Democrats controlling Congress most of the time, all the time, in fact, in one way or another. But Calvin Coolidge, all through the 20s, it was Republican House, Republican White House, House and Senate. And then in 1928, he was constitutionally entitled to run for another term. And he just said, no, like a lot of libertarians, he lacked the political ego and drive. And he said, no, I'll just go back to, I think it was Vermont by this stage, and I'll just retire. Now, the person that took over from him was Herbert Hoover, who had actually spent some time in Australia, in Kalgoorlie, doing mining. But Herbert Hoover was the opposite. He was a big glory hunter, loved talking to the media, big ego, and he took over. And then 6 months into his presidency, this is 1929, a little recession starts. Now, surprise, surprise, after you've had, a decade of growth, you're going to have it's a natural part of the free market system is to have a recession. But that it had been such a boom and they have a bit of a recession. Then Herbert Hoover freaks out and he says, oh, gee, maybe all those tax cuts weren't that good. Maybe we need a bit of regulation. So he starts bringing in reversing all the Calvin Coolidge things. And then we have the big stock market crash in October 1929, Black Friday, I think, or Black Tuesday. And then we should not have had a Great Depression in response to that stock market crash. But Herbert Hoover threw out everything that Calvin Coolidge did, even though he was a Republican, and that gave us the Great Depression. Now, then the Democrats won in 1932, and the Democrats just went to town. I mean, Franklin Roosevelt was, a semi-communist himself. One of the first things he did was recognize the Soviet Union, because previous Western governments had said we're not going to recognize them because they were a bunch of Bolshevik criminals which had taken over through force. And Franklin Roosevelt, he put taxes on the highest Americans up to 91%. He had extreme government regulation and debts. And America had a very, very, very unhappy period in the 1930s. Now, contrast that with Australia in the 1930s. We got off to a very bad start with the Great Depression, but then we had a magnificent Prime Minister who was also forgotten, Joe Lyons, who really turned things around through all the types of things that Calvin Coolidge did. So anyway, the Calvin Coolidge, he's not a name that most people will have heard of, but he truly was, in my view, the second greatest president of the United States in the 20th century behind Reagan. And, it's a real, what happens with these great thinkers and these great leaders is that the left so often dominate history that they want to talk about, Franklin Roosevelt, even though he was such a bad president in so many ways. And they ignore people like Calvin Coolidge and Joe Lyons. So there you have it, Liberal Democrats. Keep an eye out for Calvin Coolidge, because he really was in many ways the ideal leader that we would want in a libertarian utopia.
Well, that was excellent. Thank you, John. Adam actually says, well done, John. I got interested in Coolidge after a Tom Woods podcast. What a great man on so many levels. Katie says, I love John's histories. I feel like I should be sitting in front of an open fire with the hot chocolate. That sounds a bit sexy. David says, Calvin Coolidge quote is, repeal something. And Linda said that should be a line that we use. There's a lot of people saying that they've already gone and bought Professor Plimer's book, so that is fantastic. Well, I think it's time now to bring in our second very special guest, Dr. Brendan Moloney. And Brendan is down here in Melbourne as well. While I keep saying quite famously booted off LinkedIn, and there is actually a bit of a movement on LinkedIn. I'm not sure if you know, Brendan, what's going on behind your back, but there's a bit of a movement on LinkedIn, posting cat photos. Oh yes, Kerry even says here, hi Brendan, I missed your post on LinkedIn. I know you too, Kerry, as well. One of my favorites on LinkedIn is now gone, but Brendan is here tonight to talk about his wonderful new parallel movement. Brendan, welcome.
Well, thank you very much. And also I say thanks to all the panel. I am a lifelong LDP member. So I'm proud to be part of this party. And as a libertarian, I'm always supportive. So I'll give you all a bit of a background. I'm not really coming at this from a political point of view. I guess over the last couple of years with all this terrible stuff that's happening in Melbourne, I just started writing on pretty much LinkedIn, and after a few months, I was up in the millions of viewers for some crazy reason. It was largely because I would just make kind of stupid, nonsensical and satirical comments about Dan Andrews and the Victorian government and how silly the lockdowns were and all this kind of stuff. So I actually got cancelled 4 times on LinkedIn for really kind of tedious little things, but it was usually some dickhead from Rio Tinto saying, "Oh, for fuck's sake, put it on Facebook," or something like that. And but I just keep writing. So it became apparent to me that we've got a real split happening, and I think all the stuff Ian was talking about losing our middle class, losing our working class people, is something I'm deeply concerned about. Also, as a strong advocate for individualism and non-conformity, I always see that there's 2 paths. There's obviously the political path that that David and the folks are taking, but also I see a kind of a point of refusal is always open to people who don't want to participate in a kind of a non-conformist way. So this is really how the parallel movement came about. It was me thinking, well, basically, this is like a domestic violence situation. Everybody's stuck at home. I can't go anywhere. I can't get into any restaurants. I can't get into any cafes. I've got a contraband black market haircut by a generous soul. I'm going to every Chinese restaurant in Melbourne, so they'll let me in because they're the ones least most likely to avoid the Vax Pass laws and this kind of stuff. So it was really an idea, well, like this domestic violence situation, you can stay and endure it, or you can just say, look, I'm not doing that anymore. I'm going to do something different. So I had millions of people from around the world.
There's the website there for everyone watching to go and check it out. Parallel Movement
is it's new, so it's we've launched the site a couple of weeks ago, but really it's about I was getting mail from all around the world: Canada, South Africa, Europe, America, Scandinavia, all these people doing amazing things in terms of rights movements, in terms of innovation, blockchain, cryptocurrency, coming up with different educational models. So we came up with 12 kind of key parallel segments. So rather than the mainstream movement, everyone was watching Rukshan and his crew filming everyone. So it's like, well, how do we get people more involved in that kind of media and movement? Or how do we look at homeschooling people like in the States? So I moved my company last year to Texas because I thought Victoria is not a good place to have your assets or your business. So that's growing. Homeschooling is huge there. My background is setting up universities. So with all students now prohibited because they're, only accepted on the basis of the silly, dangerous facts, then it's like, well, we've set up universities, we can do alternative accreditation. So it's all kind of snowballing at the moment. So the way I describe this movement is really both a description, just to centralize a lot of the stuff that's happening all around the world and put it in one place so people can actually find out all the amazing things that are actually happening, and they can get off the grid, or they don't have to work a corporate job. They can quit and then start up their own business, or we set up businesses in America or other freedom-loving places for them, which is easy. So we're, again, building this out, but the main services will be a jobs board and jobs market, because we want people to be economically empowered and not have to be vaxxed. Accommodation, a lot of people in Melbourne now are being shut out from the rental market because they're not. So we want to create a situation where that's possible. Dating is another thing, apparently, where people are, you can't, which is a good thing, I reckon. I'm a bit biased, but I won't go into that. But maybe you want to protect your progeny. Also a DIY series. So we've got a bunch of thinkers from around the world putting together lectures, and it will keep growing, I imagine. So the goal is over the next 6 months, we'll have 10 chapters around the world doing local events, talking up the parallel stuff there, but collectively we'll also be able to leave a bit more of an imprint on, some of the injustices that are happening around the world. So the momentum's there, the movement's there, and hopefully we're a proactive force.
Yeah, I think it's really fascinating. And Chris here says, I'm very poorly attempting to start a parallel community in Queensland. So maybe, Chris, you should get in touch with Brendan.
Yeah, definitely.
How can people get in touch with you, Brendan?
Yeah, so on the site, there's like a little volunteers form. And also, if you've got any ideas to submit on there, we actually have, I think, probably 300 or 400 volunteers already, which is amazing, like for 5 or 6 weeks or something. So, but that's just in Australia. We've got, tens of thousands around, but I would definitely love anyone interested, put your name down. You can shoot me an email. We've also got a Proton email, parallel movement at Proton Mail, something like that. I'll send it to you. But yeah, please get involved. Like, again, it's a movement. So even though I've got my name there, I'm not doing it for everybody. We just really want freedom-loving people, people who want to do things a different way, and say, stick it down. Like, if you want to exclude it, we're going to go into our own restaurants. We're going to go to our own haircuts. We're going to, have jobs where we don't need to do that kind of stuff. So
yeah.
That's
Katie also says, it sounds great. I'm in a few Facebook groups who are attempting parallel jobs and schooling, etc. But it would be great to have something structured and global. And I think, and I'm with Katie, I've seen a whole bunch of these sort of groups all over the place wanting to sort of set up little movements. And it's whether they're vaxxed or not. It's kind of, it's really like if you want to partake.
Exactly, and it's not an anti-vax movement or anything.
Yeah, exactly.
Like anyone who's just sick of this whole bullshit that we have to put up with constantly and wants to do something different. So it is, and it's not a centralized thing. It's, there's movements all over the place. We just want to aggregate them and let people know you always have alternatives. And this is what this government's saying. You have no alternatives. That's rubbish. You always have alternatives, and that's the ultimate domestic abuser kind of statement. So we want to let people know there's options all around the world for them.
I think that's why there's also been such a big push in all these sort of off-grid groups, because people are realizing that, hang on, I don't want to partake in a society that I'm having to show my papers to go to the movies, to go buy a coffee.
Exactly. And how hard is it to set up something alternative now? Not really. You can have little communities everywhere. So, yeah.
John, what have you got to say about all this?
Okay, well, look, in New South Wales, we are told by Premier Perrottet that the vaxxed and the unvaxxed will be treated with complete and total equality by December the 15th. Now, that was pushed back. It was originally December the 1st. Okay, so there's a lot of people in New South Wales right now who are on the edge of their seats. So we know what's happening in Victoria. We know what happened in Queensland yesterday. The Northern Territory is probably the worst of all. Western Australia is bad. Okay, so New South Wales is the hope of the site. Now, what we saw when Perrottet came in and he sort of started lifting a lot of things, a lot of the other premiers followed like dominoes, even silly Dan Andrews. Okay, so let's hope that Dominic Perrottet sticks with his word, and we have a complete and totally equal society for everybody, zero segregation on December the 15th. I'm feeling like about 50-50 it's going to happen. Now,
well, he already pushed it back from the first.
That's right. So now, if it does happen, and surprise, surprise, I'm pretty sure there won't be an outbreak of COVID amongst the dirty vax rats. Okay, like myself. So there won't be. So then hopefully we can sort of get to Australia Day, and the other premiers will say, yeah, well, it is pretty evil what we're doing, this two-class apartheid society. But even if that were to happen, if we got to Australia Day and the whole of Australia is completely equal, I think after the last 2 years, Brendan, I think a lot of people are still going to are going to be very much thinking along your lines. They're going to say, yeah, look, we sort of want to be sort of, in this sort of a little bit disconnected from the mainstream. So
I think we just need an alternative for this not to happen in the future as well. So it's a kind of a hedge for the future. But I think the trust is broken. Like, one of the reasons I got kicked off LinkedIn is I criticised the TGA and their not TGA actually, about the relationship between doctor-patient. It's kind of fraught if there can't be a clear communication between the two. So the trust is broken for a lot of people. Like, I think they want to know that they're around people who are going to support them and trust them. And if the government's not going to do that, I think we need to do it ourselves. So true libertarian kind of philosophy in action, I guess. But we get a lot of support, so that's kind of a good sign too, I guess.
Yeah. Well, as Daniel says, the damage is done. Melbourne will never be the same for me.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
Yeah. Lionel says perhaps Parallel can partner with Nomad Network by Jason Stapleton. I haven't heard of Nomad Network, so.
Yeah, send your ideas in. I love it. I mean, one thing I'll say about the fall of Melbourne. So I was at the Prince of Wales passing by the other day, Nick Cave or the Dirty Three I saw playing there. And it was like, before it was like vaccines are your passport to freedom.
Yes.
Oh, well, that's weird. And then the next day, like Bon Jovi cover band or something. That's not the price of freedom. If there's someone reasonable playing. That was the fall of Melbourne for me. It's like our kind of bohemian culture is in trouble. So
I've got a question, Brendan.
Yeah.
Currency. How's currency going to work in this parallel world?
Well, we've got blockchain, we've got cryptocurrency.
Yeah, I thought you were going to go there.
And then one of the things I reckon is really, really exciting is if we can create a debt function, and I'm talking to people around the world about this, a debt function based on crypto that can actually provide mortgages or business debt based on crypto for average normal people. That would significantly undermine the financial sector that we have and create some competitiveness. I know that the federal government's trying to bring in an Aussie coin or get into the digital currency game, but they're too late. They're 20 years too late. This horse is bolted. So I feel
so they can tax you.
Yeah, that's right.
Track you and tax you.
Well, this is, again, the digital social credit system that they want to get us on. So I guess there's some suspicions as well. But, there are alternative currencies and a lot of decentralized currencies happening. And a lot of alternative groups are taking Bitcoin as currency now. It's too volatile at the moment and it's not perfect, but it'll happen. I'm confident. I'm optimistic.
Well, as Billy says here, it's about time we started talking about crypto on Liberty Chat. And Billy, in just a couple of weeks' time, you'll be very excited. There'll be a bit of a crypto talk on Liberty Chat.
Brilliant.
Well, thank you so much, Brendan. Now, once again, how can people get in touch with you? So it's parallelmovement.org.
Yep, and I believe
you're on Telegram or anywhere like that now that you're
so I'm on Telegram, and for Dr. Brendan Moloney or Gab, I've been accepted by the hardcore Christian movement. So they've got me. Also Signal. But if you just email Brendan at darlo.com. In fact, I'll put it in the chat. We can definitely have a bit more of a chat. So thank you all, and lovely to meet you all too. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Brendan.
Really interesting.
Welcome.
Well, I think we've got probably, there's a few more comments in there, but I think we're looking at the time. We're probably about time to wrap it up for another week of Liberty Chat. Is there anything else anyone wants to say, gents?
I just sort of like to throw one thing in, which is, it might be a bit cutting across what Brendan just said, but the thing I propose today up here to people who run pubs and nightclubs, or pubs and restaurants and coffee shops, I suggested to David Pella on the podcast that if there was some solidarity, a bit of willpower, I know what I'd be doing. I'd be saying, Anastasia Palaszczuk, you're not welcome in my restaurant.
Yes,
I can
exactly.
Deputy Premier Stephen Miles, you're not welcome. In fact, any MP in the state parliament will be asking you, how did you vote? What's your position? And if you don't have the right answer, you're not coming into our club.
Yep, exactly right. Well, I think it's been another wonderful episode of Liberty Chat, some awesome topics. I will also mention that this Sunday is the launch of our wonderful Freedom Manifesto, which I'm very, very, very excited about, which John Ruddick has been working on. Oh, yes, there it is. Thanks, Cam. I love the spirit of Eureka in that. So that's coming out on Sunday, and you'll hear more about that very, very soon. We'll put out some more information about that. But of course, as I said, get to our website, ldp.org.au, join the party, donate to the party, put your hand up to volunteer. We really need to fight the duopoly now and make some change around this country. We've got a lot of work ahead all across the country, so please do join in. And obviously when this edit goes out, share it amongst your friends. Follow David, John and Campbell on all the social media. They've got Facebook pages, they've got Twitter pages. Still waiting for some TikTok pages from them, but who knows.
I've got Insta.
Oh, there you go. David's on
Instagram. Yeah.
Excellent. We also have the party social media. We also have the party social media as well. So follow along, share the message. That is one of the best ways that you can help volunteer and spread the word. And also, as I said, look out for our Freedom Manifesto launch, our 10 points to save Australia from Sunday. Thank you one and all for joining us again on Liberty Chat. Thank you.
Thank you very much for everything. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you.